Hello, YouTube. It has been a week and something for you guys. For those of you that are watching 86 and that just watch 86 or anything else from there. Yeah, hi, YouTube, Reddit, wherever. Let me start off by saying this. Just because I'm watching an anime that you may not like doesn't mean that you should completely mute the channel. We're watching a shit ton of different anime. I believe we're watching 9 or 10, including To Your Eternity and some other ones. So just because one doesn't like your interest, there are others that you can make sure to check out. Luckily, and I will say I'm kind of proud of myself that I've been doing kind of daily uploads. So, and even if it turns into every other day, just make sure to keep supporting, hit that like button, comment, join our Discord whenever you guys can. And today, yeah, or at least for you guys, for this specific video, we're doing 86. Now, yeah. Oh, thank you, Vatosh. I know. It's gone from literally like uploading once every 2 to 3 weeks on ReZero episodes to uploading daily because I now have better opportunities since work is like 9 to 5 and I actually have the afternoons off, which is wonderful. Um, but I will say this, like, if you guys have an opportunity or a chance, or you guys really want to recommend an anime, use the comment section to recommend it. As I mentioned before, if there's an anime that I'm watching and it hits a certain standard where it's not meeting my expectations, I will stop that anime. I have no issue doing that, even if people get mad at me in whatever regard. However, with 86, it's been quite an interesting show. There's a lot of politics and drama and psychology of war involved in this, and I am really wondering where this is going. So without further ado, 86 episode numero dos. Let's get into it.
九条の機体をファイドが回収していたはずですが、
まあ、確かに奴の機体から部品は
You know, this is fucking random and fucking weird, but I have to go ahead and throw this out there. I've been wondering this since the last episode, and it's been running on my mind on simulation until quite literally like 20 seconds ago, and it finally stopped. I wonder, this main character, yes, this main character, specifically, right? We see him often as cold or, sort of like, at least in the first episode, the whole introduction, the way that he was able to go ahead and like dispatch his friend, if you will, that was like under rubbish and whatnot. Yeah, Shin. Is he the Undertaker as well? Is that the correlation of the name, right? It's sort of like your code name, like Snake, like Metal Gear type thing, right? But anyway, I wonder where this mentality comes from because right now everyone's trying to fend for themselves, and you're sort of seen as this like outlier um, thing, like outlier faction, outlier nation, outlier whatever. So I wonder what what would it take for him, or what does his family, or what does this unit mean for him, and what would it take for him to, you know, i.e., how else can I put this? If you were in a situation where your friends or family or people that you got attached to were in like a deadly environment and there was a choice to be made, let's throw out there one of those like philosophical choices. What would you take? For example, enemies are approaching all around you, and either, I don't know, four of your friends go, or you and your best friend go. Like, in terms of like, face the enemy or something like that. Where would you see yourself in that scenario? And that's on simulation that I've been running inside of my head. And just in terms of his leadership style and how he's able to go ahead and communicate, and sort of the familiar shots that we saw with their whole interactions in the first scene, and how there's these two very different statuses, right? Because in the Empire, you actually see the fact that like they have all this like disdain, and they're supposed to be like the ones ruling. There's no like familiarity. There's no actual like deep ingrained connection to what you can call family, human, even if you want to call it that way. It's all very logical. There's clear walls. There's boundaries, except for when you experience a lot of trauma and it hits you in the field and it breaks you down. And suddenly you're not able to actually handle situations that require you to actually have a mental state that is kind of normal to go into battle with a group like that. And then you have these ragtag groups of 86ers that, for a matter of fact, they've seen this all the fucking time, going out there being pawns of the Empire, per se. Or not even pawns, because the Empire doesn't even see them as humans. They see them as, like, drones, which is kind of fucked up, like that first episode. So, them being more familiar, and yet, like, they view death very differently, and the regard of death is, like, quite differently in that sense. So, putting yourself in that scenario, or the Republic, you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm talking about, because I sort of view the Republic with all the white-haired dudes as the bad one. No offense to whoever that may offend, but y- yeah, I'm sorry. You view us human beings as, like, any human beings, any race, any culture. That's nothing but trash. But that doesn't make you right. But what I'm reaching at is, like, I wonder what decisions you would make as a leader of this group, right? Even if you have to put up all these walls, all these cold stains, even if your immediate family is lost, you haven't heard from them, would you make the biggest sacrifice of all for this group, or would you see them as replaceable? And that's where my mind's been running the simulation as to what this individual would do.
208にて展開迎撃をアンダーテイカーよりハンドラー1すでに展開済みです。より前進した地点のポイント304で迎撃します。早い。さすがですね。アンダーテイカー。来るぞ。
I wonder how they how would you shit test these individuals?
のみにしてください。
I know she's trying her best, yeah.
次の観測機が出てきます。引き続き位置の特定をお願いします。はい。今日はちょっと多いな、アンダーテイカー。釜落ちなんだろ。楽しめばいい。確かに思ったよりレーベが多い。遮蔽が限られる分厄介だ。
So here's something that I've been thinking about this. Say that 86 belongs to this particular group of people. There's 85s, 84s, 83s. Why are we only I'm pretty sure that there's others in battle, correct? Like, not just 86, right? Against whatever force, individuals, country, whatever they're going into battle with. Why wouldn't they set up like a whole front, i.e., try and push? Well, that's my question. That's my point. Is, like, if you're labeling these individuals as 86ers, there has to be 85ers, right? Or 84ers. But that's exactly the fault of the Republic or Empire that I'm trying to make fun of, right? Is, like, they're trying to cover up the sun with their thumb, right? And they're saying there is no sun, there's only light that we create. I.e., if they actually wanted, for example, if you want a scenario like this is why I talk about proxy wars a lot. This is why I get into all discussions of, like, what does it mean to truly be in a situation where you can control the narrative and stuff like that. So, i.e., if you're building an empire or a republic, what is the number one thing that you can use to control people? Anyone want to take a guess? I'll let you guys know. Masters. So the number one thing that people can use to control others is the media, is the information, the way that you get it. I.e., you're not allowed to read peer-reviewed articles. The narrative, yeah, that is being established and sent there. So if they're valuing all 85 other individuals and they're saying that 86 are worth less than life, right? And you have people in the military going out throughout this whole regard. Normal society is only viewing it as droids or drones fighting one another. You have this whole propaganda of stuff. You have this narrative of an enemy that you create based off of fear that they might actually come in. What happens next? You have this whole group of people fighting people, or non-people fighting, You're creating this story as to a big war that is happening, right? And it might actually be happening, but by using fear, right? By using tactics that like our nation is so great we suffered no casualties, in this great war, even though you're actually killing people. What happens when it gets out of hand? What happens when the situation comes out of hand and turns out that, hey, you know what? Maybe there is a contract to go ahead and eradicate this whole group of individuals while trying to stem the greatness of the so called Great Republic or Empire or whatever. Your propaganda will start to slowly like default unless you're able to literally control every single like form of information that gets leaked or that is out there. Like, yeah, I don't know how else to put it other than it's really hard to like take this into consideration, like the fact that there's this giant war happening and you're only using droids without unifying the entire like humanity against it, or you're the entire people that you do have against it, you know. There's so many ways that you can like take this narrative into questioning and stuff. Oof. But let me rebut this point, Masters. It's a literal proxy war, i.e., created by you, but they were reporting it in the media. So therefore, you can't say most people aren't aware of it if they were reporting it in the Republic media in the first episode, in front of a busy street. So that takes away the narrative that not a lot of people know about it. There was a proxy war that was set up so that only people in a specific district, i.e., let's say only one town knew about it, which was all military personnel. That would make a lot more sense. But yet, when you're blasting it on one of the busiest streets inside of the Republic, now you have a whole counterspell as to what this potentially could mean and whether or not there are reports that are happening. I'm just pointing this out logically through a psychological lens. Like, yeah, and I mean, with that being said, and it's the reason why I'm throwing this out there is because if someone even has like an ounce, an inch of like that there's something wrong, they can start pointing out like certain things that really don't make sense. I.e., a great threat is coming towards our door, and we're using only drones. Weird, but okay, I'll allow it. Um, okay, Chris. Then let me throw this back out to you. In today's society, let's say that Argentina or Chile or the United States or whatever got into a big conflict, right? Let's say like a world level catastrophe. And you're only in the media, it is only being reported that like drones are being used. But yet it's a world level catastrophe. How would you take information? Would you take it at face value or would you look into it? Because I'm pretty sure that even though, like, you can say, oh, it's because it's happening outside of the borders, in the US, there's a lot of conflicts, regional conflicts, wars, whatnot, that are always happening outside of US jurisdiction, borders, whatever, right? Media gets to report whatever aspects that they want to go ahead and report in, but yet not everyone takes it at face value, and there's always more information to be learned and had. So if you take away, let's say, the internet, there's no way to get direct information in that regard, right? So now the form of media is limited. Um, so let's go off of communication networks then. There's no communication networks out there. Okay. There's only drones. If that were the case, and this we're talking about a big fight against, let's say, a foreign country or foreign whatever, but we're only using drones. Why are we only using drones? Like logically, for me as an individual living in the state, wouldn't make sense. I'd be questioning that. I'd be saying, you know what? Why are we only using a small capability of our giant military personnel in handling these things when we can be using personnel and just get it done and over with? I hope that makes sense. Like, um, just that frame of thinking, you know? Well, Master, that depends on who you're asking. Because in terms of Syria, there was way more reports than just necessarily uh, a couple of drones. I think only die-hard personnel that believe everything that is being told, looked into that. But a lot of people outside, like normal people, tend to look at different news sources and different things. So it's just really important to point that out because for me, this is just something that I'm questioning and I'm going through as well, logically. Oof.
ハンドラー
Oof.
1より船体確認。スコルピオンの長距離砲です。注意してください。観測機の推定位置を送信します。候補3
Oh.
箇所確
Oh.
認です。制圧を。
ハンドラー1、思考レーザーによるデータ送信がこちらの位置が特定される恐れがあります。作戦中の指示は口頭のみにしてください。
すみません。
That doesn't take away from her cuteness, though, or the situation at hand. It's just one small thing that, my brain instantly went to question, you know?
西暦2139年。
は真実ではありません。確実に犠牲者は出ています。一度の戦闘で数十人の命が失われることも。
いやでもあいつら人ではないんですよね。進化に失敗した人型の豚だって。
彼らは人間です。私は日々彼らと共に戦っています。共に戦っているとのことですが、少佐は戦場に行かれたことはあります。一度だけですが。戦場には行きましたが、戦ったわけではありません。命を懸けて戦っているのは、我々が市民権を剥奪した86と呼ばれる人々だけです。
困りますよ少佐、お願いしたじゃないですか。奴らの肩を持つようなことはしないでくださいと。
先生、我が共和国の国旗が示すものは何ですか？
何を？
自由と平等、博愛と正義と高潔。
So in this empire, these white-haired individuals have to outnumber all of the other individuals that ain't white-skinned, light hair, following these exact predispositions in that regard, right? Because take anyone, anything, and try and divide them into 85, 86 different sections, with one of them completely, being individuals that don't necessarily fall into these categories. I mean, in any form, in any country, in any nation that this has ever happened to, and yes, I am referring to, you guys know what, specifically, there were still people that were questioning the morality and the aspects and I don't know how to put it, the regards that the government was doing, regardless of how information was controlled and the narrative was spun. So it's really interesting to see that, she's gone ahead and done the, talked out loud in a lecture room where, young minds are being shaped and formed to think in a certain regard. And I wonder, it's probably one of the hardest things to go ahead and do because, as a society, say that this has been happening 8-9 years, you've pretty much indoctrinating individuals to think this way, to feel this way, to accept it as fact. And if they're already, say, about to graduate into school, into getting whatever thing, you have to break generational trauma and generational belief and schemas that are way too hard. So okay, let me counter that, Master. Even in World War II, when information was highly centralized in certain countries and certain states, where certain belief factors were gone ahead and pushed in certain regards. We're not even going to go that far and say that even today in certain countries where you can view democracy as very antagonistic in that regard, control the internet, control the flow of information, there are still people, a large portion of people, who question their centralized government agencies and question the way that information is shared and flowed. I.e., yeah, there are a lot of, that's why there's, you have a lot of defectors, not just in North Korea, but in other countries around the world. Individuals who question certain things, and they probably can't leave, they probably can't do anything, and this is the part where I'm separating it, you have individuals who are powerless in that regard. Why? Because they, They've probably been subdivided into things like that. So it's just really interesting to see this approach, and really interesting to see her actually be able to connect, considering all the probably education, moral education, if you want to put it that way, that they've indoctrinated into these individuals.
共和国の愚かな過ちを正すためよ。はいはい。で、どうなの？噂のアンダーテイカーは？コミュニケーションはしっかりとってるわ。毎晩パラレードで同調して。毎晩？何話してんの？いろいろよ。
So, Master, let me counter this argument, right? It's only been one generation, and clearly the Empire, Republic, whatever, was almost completely wiped out by the foe. And let's say that in the span of a year, everyone was separated into these 85 districts. Magically, you don't see people with dark hair, dark skin color, different features, whatever, around anymore. They all look the same, like you. Or like whatever individual, like the girl. They all look exactly the same. All same hair, all whatever. I'm pretty sure there would be a lot of people being like, what happened to these individuals? Oh, they were completely decimated, but they were here just a couple months ago. Like, because not enough time, like it hasn't been 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Like, people will still remember these other individuals. Now, how do you control that? I don't know, but it is important to point that out, and that's what I'm saying. It's a good no, but like my whole thing on this is just simply like there are people questioning this. There would be logically people questioning any of this in the regard of what time period there is. What time period has passed. What moral education looks like in this regard, so on and so forth. And it's important to just like throw this out, because psychologically speaking, like, you'll always have groups that are against any form of information, good or bad, i.e. vaccination is good. You have even with all the research in the world, you still have people that are like, vaccinations are bad. They're turning our frogs gay. You have people that like throw out like a random question, good or bad. There's still that group of people that like do that. There's outliers and stuff like that. And that's the sort of point that I'm trying to make. Like, regardless of any intention, any whatever, there's that there. And that's imperative that we're watching it in this anime. This is why I like this anime quite a bit, because people are always afraid of, like, I don't know, like touching on some deep subjects, if that makes sense.
パラレードアクティベート、同調対象、スピアヘッド、プロセッサー。
Because it's a song, I have to mute it. Wait, is that the end? No way. Absolutely no way. All right, before I look at whatever's being said, Craig, is that the end for real? No way, my heart, dude. That went way too quickly. This is only 18 minutes, dude. Way too quickly. Okay, what I was gonna say is, like, it's sweet seeing, like, oh, okay. Well, now I'll say my point, and then we'll continue. It is so sweet seeing the way that, like, they're forming connections, and even like getting excited to talk to one another, her being excited to go ahead and, like, talk to them and start seeing them as human and going through all of these things. And this is why I applaud this anime. And this is why I genuinely find it so interesting. And even pointing out, like, the good, yeah, I know, the good and the bad, like, everything in between. It is so interesting to bring up points like this because it gets your mind going. Like, the psychology of the personnel, sociology in general, of, like, how society would deem itself in this scenario, and how people would interact, and would they have these back and forths. I'm pretty sure that there would be debates happening or arguments happening just like this out of, like, personnel, not out loud, probably not loud in public squares, but in just general situations, and that's why it's so interesting and intriguing to find certain things like this. Um, so anyway, let me read real quick. So here's the thing. And even if you're talking in regards like that, like people are always willing to give up their freedom for more security or whatever. If you're talking about specifically in the Patriot Act, right, which can deem any U.S. citizen as a potential target, uh, completely throw apart the justice system or the certain regards like that, i.e., U.S. citizens can get droned apparently. Um, what you can go ahead and go into is sort of like that still doesn't stop that information from leaking, i.e., if this happened in any regard, information leaks pretty quickly and the public becomes aware pretty quickly in that regard. And it's not just from U.S. like led state media. You also have like outside information that can leak in, which is sort of the beauty of it. But no, that aside, like that's what I'm saying. Like I'm not criticizing it in a bad way. I'm criticizing it in the way that like an individual, a normal individual in this society, what they could probably expect and go into. Yeah, but again, people in power versus people not in power, i.e., people in power will definitely try and put this like rows of security in it. People not in power, for the most part, can see through the bullshit. I guess most normal people up will probably, did as much as people like to say that they only watch one or two news sources, there are more news sources out there that individuals watch and get their information from nowadays. I.e., even though it happened and now people can go ahead and like use it as a way to like secure certain things, if it gets to a certain point where let's say that only individuals that have a certain stature, hair color, whatever, can be saved, there's going to be a big revolt, like it or not.
でもまあどこまでついてこれるかな。
こら来て。どうぞ。
ありがとう。
Oh,
アンジュ。
yo, I gotta be honest, that bread kind of looks good. I'm not gonna lie, it might be that I'm hungry, but the bread looks kind of good.
ですね。
I swear, if he dies or if he's on the verge of death, I will stop.
行きたいところや見たいものとか。
考えたこともありませんね。
そうですか。
I love this
で
kid.
も今から考えておいてもいいかと思いますよ。何か思いつくかもしれませんし、きっと楽しいと思います。
Oh. Oh.
そうかもしれませんね。
死にたくない。
Oh no, what a title. What a fucking title to end on. Oof. Oof. But overall, really, really interesting and good anime. I feel like there's a lot to go ahead and take away from this. There's a lot of different points that you can go ahead and like focus on through either lens, psychological, sociological, um, what norms and what else is out there. You can criticize it in that aspect, but then also relate it to different forms throughout history and what is good and what is not, and how people might react in certain cases like that. One of the biggest things that I'd go ahead and take away from this is sort of like, even though you can criticize people reacting a certain way, you can also understand, for example, the fear that people may feel if you wake up and all of a sudden all your friends, or especially if you lived in like wherever all these dark colored individuals lived in, are no longer there. Or like people that don't exactly look like the main characters, you know? If you start paying attention to stuff like that, like it might be a bit of a terrifying experience regardless. But what I will go ahead and say is like, um, even if it's not meant, even if you have a whole system of control of information, like, even as Master says, like, certain countries, there's 1,001 ways to go ahead and try and like, not just adapt, but like overcome certain stigmas. And it's either by direct exposure, by literature knowledge, by expectations or generational. So there's a lot of different ways that this can go, and I'm just excited to see where exactly it ends up. But anyway, have a great day, guys. Practice some self-care, and we'll see you guys next time as we here on Twitch will